Okay, I think I'll get us kicked off as I say a few words just as introductions to our panel as well. First of all, thank you all for coming to our panel around how intelligent labels are redefining the future of retail across multiple categories or multiple segments. My name is Francisco Melo, in case you can't match the person to the picture, and I manage the RFID division for Avery Dennison. And at Avery Dennison, we work at this intersection between material science and digital technology. And over the years, we've become a world leader in the tagging solutions for apparel and footwear in particular. And today, we're going to be discussing how RFID has evolved over the years, and also how this sort of RFID is by far the most prevalent solution within what we call intelligent labels, which is ways of providing unique digital identities to items. Certainly, apparel has started that trend. What started to be I would say, an in-store optimization tool became gradually a fundamental tool for omni-channel retail, and it's now expanding beyond that. What can it do for the supply chain? What can it do if it gets into the hands of the consumers? And to help us with this, I have, I'm privileged to have a great panel to work through, so I actually don't have a lot to do other than introducing them and eventually challenge them in a couple of questions. And, if I go left to right from your perspective, we got Jason Sain. Jason is the co-lead for the RFID retail group in Accenture Strategy, which was before Kurt Salomon, for those of you that know. And he's been consulting for several years. He will share with us some of the findings of a very recent study that Accenture published around RFID adoption towards the end of last year, and what that study reflected from the state of the evolution of the technology. Joining, and one step to the right, it's Pam Sweeney. Pam is the SVP of Logistics Systems and Technology at Macy's. She's a long industry, known person. She's been, with RFID for many years. She's done a ton for the industry, so much so that she's been recognized also by the Special Achievement Award by RFID Journal, I believe the year before last. And it's great to have you as well, Pam, to share what's happening with Macy's, what you're doing, and how you see the future as well. And last but not least, Dr. Bill Hartgrave. I'll probably, all of you know who he is, but I'll still say it. So he's the provost and the vice president of Auburn University. He's the founder of the RFID lab at Auburn University as well. He started the RFID research lab, he told me 15 years ago, at Arkansas. And he's also been a main figure within the industry, and also having been recognized with a Special Achievement Award by RFID Journal prior to Pam. So again, a great panel that hopefully will kick us off to a great discussion. And there were two things I think I would just like to put it out there, and then we'll probably follow a little bit of a free flow. One is, what are sort of the industry trends and the findings we've been finding? Probably we'll start with what kind of a summary we get of the Accenture study, and then we'll build from there. And then I think as a second topic, as this what we called in the title as redefining the future, so what's next for RFID, be it along the supply chain and within different use cases, or beyond apparel at a very high level. So with that, Jason, why don't you?
Thank you. It's unbelievably an honor to sit up here on the panel with the two guests. As Francisco mentioned, about 7 years ago, I got involved with several clients that were looking at RFID. And what we found was that there were more questions than there were answers around adoption, around ROI, around is anyone in the industry using the technology? And if so, what are they using it for? So as we helped several clients run some pilots, we also decided to go out into the market and conduct our RFID and retail study. And I think it's been an interesting effort, as we've done now 3 of these every 2 years. We've seen adoption and piloting and testing of RFID move from somewhere in the 32-33% range back in 2013, all the way up to in North America, up to 92%. In terms of companies and retailers that are utilizing and testing and piloting RFID. We've really seen in the last 12 to 18 months an explosion of piloting and testing, specifically around RFID omni-channel use cases. What's interesting is that Asia is fairly close behind, running at about 70% of the retailers surveyed. Our one anomaly is in Europe, where we're running 30 to 35% of those companies surveyed are actually in piloting or testing at this point. But certainly over the last 12 to 18 months, we have seen a huge proliferation of RFID being used in the retail community.
you can hear this, okay. To add to the study that you guys have released in November, I believe. Great study, and if you haven't seen it, I suggest you take a look at it because there's a couple of interesting things in that study. One was that how you looked at how they were implementing different parts of the omni-channel house, if you will, or those characteristics. How many were doing that? How many were doing two or more? It's really telling as to how well the retailers are using it. And we do something that complements that study, and as we look at it on an annual basis of the retailers and the brand owners in the U.S., and we look at from a depth of use perspective on whether they're just getting started, whether they're in that advanced pilot stage, or whether they're rolling out to deployment. And it's very consistent with what we saw from Accenture. And we've done it now for several years on that annual basis, so you can see them as retailers come into it, they investigate it, they then move into that advanced pilot, and then into deployment. And we're seeing more deployment at the upper level of use than we've seen certainly at any point in the past.
Excellent. I mean, any perspective of, why would that be the case? I mean, are there any trends or any sort of insights from the market that, either Pam, you're seeing in retail, or obviously you guys, just from a perspective of providing a view?
Go ahead.
So in 2012, Macy's started to invest in RFID technology, and it was really to allow us to be able to count inventory in our stores, to have an inventory accuracy of greater than 95%. That being said, 2012, there was no such thing as omni-channel, at least that specific concept. As we progressed over the years and had, obviously we have our private brands that are 100% penetrated, we've gotten up to about 80% of where our suppliers are contributing to this program. But that being said, 3 years ago, we started to look at all the fulfillment, right? How can you fulfill for the customer need? And it wasn't just out of our fulfillment locations, it was out of our stores as well. And this technology allowed us to have a confidence for our colleagues so that they could go out and know that if it was in their file, and if in fact an order was pushed out to a store to fulfill, that they could find it, locate it, and ship it, and not so much after it bounced from store to store, but basically on the initial fill. So you're absolutely right. We've found over the years that categories and product that are tagged with RFID have a 4 to 6% initial fill rate. That's better than non-RFID departments. So we agree, omni-channel. We couldn't have positioned the technology utilization at a better time at Macy's, and it is a foundational, transformational technology, and we are continuing to support it and move forward with various different new use cases, which I guess we'll talk about a little bit later.
So one of the things that probably is stated in the obvious, but even today, although RFID has been around now for several years, it's certainly something that at NRF and others we've talked about for a long time, and as new retailers come in, we still have those conversations almost on a weekly basis with a new retailer of, well, what's the first thing that we do? And the first thing that you do is you use RFID for inventory accuracy. Whatever that looks like in your store, in your supply chain, you've got to start with inventory accuracy. And you would think that we've talked about that enough that that's the starting point, but we still have to reinforce that. And I know, Jason, you found that in your study, but would you mind, I referenced those, the BOPUS and the other things that people are doing. Can you speak about that from your study? Because to Pam's point, I think it's important of all those things that retailers are doing, it was such a stark contrast of those who are using RFID versus those that are not and what they're able to do.
Yeah, happy to do that. I think what we have seen certainly over the last 5 or 6 years is that the customer journey is much different than it once was, and it starts at very unique places. And a customer expects that they can have their product where they want it, when they want it, and how they want it. And the only way that we see that retailers can react to that and can actually attain and exceed a customer's expectations is by being able to, in effect, fulfill on that desire. We found in the study that, and over the years we've asked the question, is there a replacement for RFID? Is there some other technology that can allow you to understand where your merchandise is? And that number has gone down. Now I think it's 84% of the retailers said, I don't see a replacement for RFID to help solve that. And as the 18 months or so that this kind of hockey stick adoption, as we have seen it, and the study shows with RFID, it really is around omnichannel. In the study, we tried to go as deep as we could into defining what omnichannel is, whether that's ship from store, buy online, pick up in store, ship to store, reserve goods, a plethora of different things that a potential customer or current customer would want. And what we found is that those that have piloted or are currently implementing RFID, 83% of them have 3+ use cases just with omnichannel alone. Those that didn't, somewhere in the 23 to 27% range. So quite a huge difference of enablement, because at the end of the day, we feel that if a client wants a piece of merchandise and you click on your phone or on your app or on your email and it's not there, you may lose that customer. That journey may end and you may never not get them back. So it's very, very important that the accuracy by which you are telling a customer the product is there is true, and you could fulfill that order.
That's great. Thank you, Jason. And just, I think I was actually talking to a retailer recently that was telling me about their ROI and how their ROI was predicated on the sales lift of the store and didn't have any omni-channel impact into it. And I think what was historically the traditional ROI of the in-store piece is today fundamentally challenged and changed, certainly by the importance of what the inventory accuracy adds to that. And is it fair to say that as the RFID technology matures, and obviously you've said that's 90+, of the respondents in the US, I believe, responded that they are either adopting or actively piloting and testing the technology. I mean, what do we think is kind of next for the technology, and certainly for those that have been, gaining a lot of experience within that? Obviously, Macy's being a great example of that. I mean, what would it be next? Be it, within the supply chain, the consumer, different use cases, different industries. I mean, any perspective? What's next for RFID? Maybe we start with Macy's and then get a perspective from the panel.
Yeah, so we talked about the fact that we do cycle counting in our stores and have been for a while. We also do display sampling as well. Those were the primary use cases that Bill referenced. But as we go forward, we know a lot more about how we can use the technology. A lot is around locating the product in the store. A lot is around understanding how do we take a handheld type of data capture to much more of either a fixed infrastructure, robotics, a different mobile solution, so that you're going to real-time data capture of RFID tags and product so that you can use it to do a lot of different things. I.e., you can, we do a lot with our asset protection use cases. If you enable smart exits, smart fitting rooms, interactive fitting rooms, you have a lot of capability to understand the movement of the product within the store or within a location. That being said, you also can have that boundary now to touch, to go out of and communicate with the customer. And the customer experience will not only be enhanced by knowing that we have an accurate inventory, but now we can do much more of suggested selling, perhaps interact and have them opt in and say, hey, we saw this on your wish list when you were shopping on our web, and we happen to have it in our store, and it's on the second floor, and let me show you where it is, and to be much more interactive that way. That's how we see the capabilities of RFID, also at point of sale. As we capture more of the serialized data, because that's what this is, and it's a unique ID, we can attach that unique ID to a person, and as well as understand the life cycle of that particular serialized ID. It can give you a lot of insights to design. It can give you insights to the product that you would want to reorder into. It could give you insights about your customer. So we believe that as we go forward, we're going to merge the different ways to capture the data and then make it much more a much better decision and intelligence around that particular capture of the data.
I hope everybody got the very subtle point that Pam was making there, because it's actually very subtle but a very profound point. And certainly Macy's has been an innovator in this space and in use of technology. But it is something I think worth expanding on just a few minutes. It's one thing to have inventory management and full visibility. I mean, you have to have that, and that goes back to what we talked about with inventory accuracy. Without inventory accuracy, you can't have full visibility. You don't know where things are, where you have them, right? And so that's one thing. But the very subtle thing that Pam talked about, which is really leading edge, and I hope everybody here goes away with that, if nothing else goes away with that point, it's that marrying of identity management with inventory management. And most retailers, if they're moving down the path of inventory management, they'll get there. They may even do some identity management, but they're not marrying the two. And magic happens when you marry identity management with inventory management. Now, it's not easy. It takes a while, and we're still on the really starting line, if you will, for the most part, because it does require intelligence. It's not just enough just to grab the data, because when we talk about identity management, we're really talking about one view of the customer, whether that customer is in your store, on their phone, at home, and that is a very difficult thing to do, as I'm sure Pam will attest to, is that it may be one thing to marry that online customer to inventory, but to know when that customer who is in your store, Mary or Beth, is the same Beth that's on the phone looking at something, or was on her computer 2 hours before she came to the store. When you start marrying those things up and really extract the intelligence from that, that's when magic happens.
Yeah, I think those are all great points, and I would just add maybe two additional ones for thought. We have a lot of clients, and the survey was pretty clear that almost 50% of the retailers that responded are really looking at RFID for a seamless checkout, right? So that experience is as simple and as easy as possible as they leave the store. So I think that is going to be a critical piece of the entire process, and RFID appears to play a key role in that. Number two is really the massive amount of data that is coming by all of the touch points that they described. I don't think we've even scratched the surface on how analytics can be used to take the data that is recovered from the movement of the product with the RFID tag and help that to gain valuable insights all the way up from a demand and supply planning in the merchandise groups, et cetera, and how to run our businesses better and ultimately keep less inventory in the stores, but still be able to satisfy the customer demand. And I think from a cost savings, that's going to be a huge, huge use case moving forward.
And we know that when that happens, right, when you have the product, when and where she wants it, the Net Promoter Score goes up, right? And the more you know about her when she comes into your store, the more your Net Promoter Score goes up. And we know that there's a connection between Net Promoter Score, a direct connection between Net Promoter Score and sales. And Pam, I don't know if you can comment on that or not, but...
No, you're absolutely right. I think the more that we are confident that the inventory that we offer through all the different ways that she can buy is accurate, then we know we have confidence that we're not going to disappoint. And if you don't disappoint, normally the Net Promoter Score they'll rate you high. Now, obviously, having the inventory and being able to fulfill it is one thing. There's a lot of other components of the Net Promoter Score, but for the most part, we believe that that it's integral to have an accurate inventory, and RFID is the way that we get it.
It's interesting, Pam, and I think, Bill, if you recall, back in maybe 2 years ago, we had a retailer that shared exactly that same perspective. So, the Net Promoter Score, one of the biggest detractors is I can't find what I want. And I can't find what I want might be in the store, might be on my phone, or wherever I am. So certainly that's... So is it fair to say that then, RFID becomes an important foundation to merge this physical space with the digital space, which I think was the point you were alluding to. I want the same level of convenience, the same level of information, the same level of, experience overall in the store as I want online, right? I think that's very much where...
The consumers don't separate them in their minds now. right? So if you're a retailer and you are now segmenting your customers by those are in your store versus those are online versus those are in your store on their phone. If you try to segment them, then you're actually going against the consumer because they don't see them as different channels. That's why it's called omni-channel, right? It's not called multi-channel. It's called omni-channel. It is one channel.
Sure, that's great. I mean, Bill, in particular, as I know you've had a sort of a long research around what's the impact on the supply chain and Project Zipper, I believe it's called. I mean, any insights you can share from that as well with the team?
Yeah, so one of the things that, we've been so focused on the store for some time, right, with item level and really getting things right at the store because we knew that was really where the lowest hanging fruit was from an improvement perspective, right? That's where things kind of fell apart. But we, over the last couple of years, in what we've called Project Zipper, we looked at RFID up the supply chain then. As we would any study, we first really have to establish what is the baseline, and therefore we know how much we can improve. Now, if you think about the process from issuing a PO to an ASN, from getting it from the brand owner's DC to the retailer DC. Look, that's something that we've done for decades, right? It's tried and true, no issues there. Wrong. What we did when we went in and we had 8 brand owners and 5 retailers involved in this, so lots of different transfer points between brand owners and retailers in the study. We looked at it over a year, and we looked at how many inaccuracies we had in that process. And what we found was using the traditional non-RFID process that 69% had some type of inaccuracy in it from that ASN to the receipt at the retailer DC. Now, 69% is a high number, and the way that we function now is much like we have with inventory accuracy at the store. It's just been such a prevailing problem that we build these workarounds. We know there's going to be errors, and we build these workarounds. Now, in many of those cases, those inaccuracies result in claims. In this case, right? So the retailer was expecting, 20 pieces. They say they got 18, so there's a claim, and so it results in the claim process, which is a big part of that brand owner and retail relationship, and big dollars in many cases. But we found 69% had issues with RFID. When RFID was used from the brand owner DC to the retailer DC, we had 1 error during that period of time. 1 error. So 99.9%. In fact, the last 10 months of the study, 0 errors. So essentially eliminating the claims portion of that equation when RFID was used. And we're continuing to build that out, but the early part, again, over a year, over several brand owners, retailers, it was actually quite eye-opening. We expected some error, but with a very mature process, it's has a lot of errors.
Thank you. Very, very compelling. Just shifting gears then to, what's next? So obviously, primarily RFID has grown a lot around apparel and footwear. From a industry segment, or if you'd like, sort of other categories, whether they are adjacencies or more. Any perspective from what you're hearing and what you're seeing, either what you're thinking at Macy's or what you're hearing, obviously, Bill and Jason.
Well, I think as far as utilizing RFID, it's all around just efficiencies in your processes and really eliminating some of the processes. So with the serialized data, there's so much that we can do. We focused primarily over the last several years in our store network. We're moving it back, working with our vendors now that they are source tagging for us to have win-wins as it relates to our partnerships and our relationships. Whether it goes right to what we order, inventory position, carrying costs, all of that, or whether it's more a way to do business that's more innovative because we have the technology and we have the ability to understand where it is at any one point in the supply chain. So, concrete use cases, there's about 129 that have been published, from Auburn, the industry groups, et cetera. I think we're really interested in trying just to have consistency across the processes that we use. So instead of having, barcode for some, RFID for another, where we do have RFID, we want to leverage that technology as much as we can, as it relates to returns, as it relates to various other processes that either we haven't invented yet and we're not sure of, or ones that we use. We're doing a lot of different marketplace types of adventures, so there's different ways to work with our vendors depending on what that business relationship is, and we look to use RFID for that.
Yeah, a couple of other things that are of interest with the amount of data, as we've talked about, that the tags can help unlock along the journey from, let's say, raw material all the way through consumption by the consumer. The tie-in with blockchain is something that we have a lot of clients that are talking to us about, helping them energize that, and how would that work. I think that's a big piece. And I think if we look at things outside of apparel, any item that's going to have high velocity need for fulfillment, could be cosmetics, could be accessories, could be other things, I think are at play, if ensuring that the inventory is in the location that you would fulfill from. And then really, the other piece of this that I think continues to be on the map is really around foodstuffs and other types of commodities where we really didn't think about RFID, but now with the opportunity for freshness and things of that nature in retail, we have a lot of food providers that are coming to us as well.
I'll just add on a couple of things there, especially on the blockchain side. What we saw in Project Zipper was, again, although we've done this for years, the data was coming in various forms, different media, different file formats. It was unbelievable. There was no consistency across all these brand owners and retailers. Blockchain is, I think, something that we will see used more as we go forward. One is with RFID as a data carrier. Now we have a consistent data carrier. With GS1 standards, we have a data standard then for that. And then blockchain provides that opportunity to share data securely, reliably, and accurately. And I think that's just been a missing piece for that, and I think it's going to kind of coalesce all together. And then I'll just echo myself from what I said earlier. Is the next big thing is really the intelligence that you extract from all this data, right? It's not enough just to have it there and kind of look in silos. And with this panel session, labeled intelligent labels, it is all about the intelligence that we extract for that. That'll separate the good retailers from the great retailers.
Very good, thank you. Thank you all, very insightful. I'll suggest we open it up for questions. We have a few minutes for that. If there's any questions from the panel, yes, please. What about large appliances? Yeah, what about large appliances?
So let me just comment. So Macy's, before we even entered into the EPC world and RFID as it relates to store inventory, we started to tag our furniture and bedding. So all of our warehouses, all of our merchandise is tagged in there. We do it internally. We have not, we're trying to work with some of our vendors to tag for us, but so a large appliance, I mean, you're talking a sofa, you're talking case goods, you're talking open stock. We do that today. And it's just, working with the environment and working with the physical attributes around the piece in order to get the right tag and get the right ranges and all that.
Sorry, I couldn't hear that. Yeah, Jason kind of alluded to that, and adding to what Pam said, I think what we see is the SKU complexity will dictate how much return you're going to have on those items, right? So obviously, the faster they are and the faster they move through the supply chain, the more likely they are to have a return. So we have customers that are looking into that. I wouldn't say by what we've seen that's the sweet spot of where most of the benefit would come from, if that answers the question. Thank you. Yes, please.
What are some of the applications for returns?
Any comment on applications for returns?
Yeah, so have you shopped at Macy's? Okay, so do you see when they, at point of sale, they'll put a little serialized barcode right next to the UPC, right, or cover up some of the care tag messaging? We're serializing that barcode. Now, if you also notice on that tag, it's an EPC, right? So From a returns perspective, we believe that it could help with the visibility and the information around that return. So there's efficiencies where we wouldn't have to put that barcode on the actual UPC tag and just use the EPC. And it's also really to understand where that item is, because it's a serialized unit. So specifically, it could offer different ways to set up return centers, et cetera, or return areas, lockers, all of that. I mean, there's a lot of people testing different return processes, but it is a big, it's a big topic of conversation, because returns are a real challenge, especially in an omni-channel world.
Very good. There's a mic here at the front. I know it's a bit far from people down at the back. So any other questions, taking the chance that we